Hello and welcome back to Web Design for Small Business. In this video, part 7, jQuery and Bootstrap, we're going to be talking about installing both of these frameworks and how to use them and why we're using them. But before we begin with all of that, I'm just going to go back over some of the stuff that we had talked about in the last video. So going into our CSS file in NetBeans, I changed what the background color and the main text color are going to be. So if you recall before, the background color I had set was kind of a pastel green. I chose to go with more of a parchment yellow to kind of give it that gold look. Just thinking of more of the color schemes, I decided to tweak it a little bit. The text color itself, I changed it from black to a really dark gray. So when I apply those changes, this is what it looks like. Not a whole lot different. I mean, the H1 text is still the same red, but as you can see, it's now against this yellow instead. But I wanted to, before we continue, we had talked about how to set annotation text in HTML and PHP. I want to talk about how we do that now in CSS, or cascading style sheets. So above the body, I'm going to create a new line, and in there I'm going to do just that. And if you remember in PHP where we can do the double forward slash or the double slash with the asterisks and text in between, it's this double slash with the asterisks and the text in between how you do it in CSS. You can't do just the plain double slash like you can in PHP. Only this way works, but that's how we do it in CSS. Why I want to do this is I basically want to label what my colors are, so that way when we go through Bootstrap and we need that quick reference to the colors that we've chosen, we can reference them here. Okay, that's all. So basically my background color is going to be this CC999. And there's no rhyme or reason as to what I'm typing here. I'm just entering notes, more or less. Actually, I will enter it on separate lines. That will make it a little bit clearer what I'm doing. Okay. Text. Okay. And it's convenient because it's Highway 45 and I'm using grid number 45. That's why I chuckled to myself, but don't mind me. Anyway, I'm going to save that out because this is basically our notation. It won't appear or have any effect on the final thing, but it's just a place where I can keep notes. So noting that. Okay, so now we're going to dive right into it. So with jQuery, and I just did a Google search for jQuery here, it's basically a JavaScript library designed to simplify HTML DOM tree traversal and manipulation. Well, you can read it there if you like. Basically, the important thing is it is free and open source. So it doesn't cost you anything, but to sum it up, jQuery is JavaScript made easy. They basically took all the main functions that people use on a regular basis within JavaScript and then made shortcuts for all of those. And that's really all it is. It's used a lot by a lot of people, and for good reason. It is amazing, and I use it all the time. And it really does just simplify everything that we do with JavaScript. And because it is just JavaScript and JavaScript shortcuts, it has no effect on the back end whatsoever, so it doesn't muck with security at all, and that's important. So to download, we go to jQuery.com/download, or you can just go to jQuery.com and then click the download button, and that will bring you to this page. And from here, you will see a bunch of different things. But what we're going to be looking for is this one here that says download the compressed production jQuery 3.5.0. If it doesn't say 3.5.0, you may be watching this video in the future, and they may have updated it since then, so this might be a higher number than what you see here. But for now, that's what we have. So you see if I highlight it, at the bottom, it has that code.jQuery.com/jQuery-3.5.0.min.js. That's what we want. And when you hover over a link and it shows you something like that, it tells you what that's linking to, and it's linking directly to a file. Now, when a link is linking directly to a file, it means that we have the ability to right-click on it and select Save Link As, and that will actually download the file to wherever we need it to be downloaded to. So I'm going to download that. And you can see there it is downloaded. And then going back into our NetBeans, I am going to right click on our source files, select new and folder. And in this folder, I'm going to type JS for JavaScript and finish. Alright, so now we have a new folder labeled JS. Select that folder, hit new, and PHP file. And you should know by now what I'm doing. Save that index file as a blank page. And now I am going to click and drag that file that I just downloaded into that JS folder. So now I have this jQuery-3.5.0.min.js. Okay. I'm just going to right click on that. Actually, I'm going to right click on the entire folder and go upload. When you upload more than one file, you will get this. You can either check all there, or you can select individual files, check all and upload, and you can see the remote log is going pretty crazy, and it is done. Just making sure that it uploaded it in case it didn't do it by default, but it should have. And now we go back to our index.php, and you guessed it, we need to create another link to this file. However, there is one catch. With this, because this is a JavaScript file and we want to create a link to JavaScript, we're not actually creating a link. What we're doing is we're creating a script. So with a script, the script does have a beginning and end tag. And then for the script, we're going to create an attribute that is called source, or src. And the src is the URL for our file. And save. And now we have jQuery. But I am going to do one more thing. I'm going to actually move this and put this above the links. So scripts before links. And the reason for this is sometimes when we create CSS files, it may require some of the JavaScript, and the way that things load is it always loads in the order that it's listed. So anything on top gets loaded before anything on the bottom. So we're going to put all of our JavaScript before we put our other files. And honestly, this icon file can usually be the very last thing that's loaded. So we're just going to reorganize that, kind of reversing the order of those, keeping our title at the top. Save that again. Okay, so that is our jQuery. And now we're going to talk about Bootstrap. So Bootstrap is a little bit different. It is more of a framework. And it is basically a set of templates. It combines HTML, CSS, and JavaScript to create easy to use layouts, basically. And again, because it just uses HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, it doesn't touch our PHP, so it is secure. This was actually developed for Twitter. And a lot of different really mainstream websites use it. So going to Bootstrap, it's getbootstrap.com. If you go to just bootstrap.com, that is a completely different site, has nothing to do with this. Getbootstrap.com is the site, and you will get that just searching for Bootstrap. You see it's the top thing there. Okay, so at getbootstrap, now, you might see the get started, download, all this stuff, but we're not going to go there. What we're going to do is where it says version 4.4 up in the top corner here, and again, if you're watching this a little bit later, that number might be going up by then, but for now, this is the latest. And what we want is not the latest 4 point something version, we want the latest 3 point something version. So version 3.4.1. So we're going to select that. Now, the reason why I do this, if you look here down at the bottom of this page under the 3.4, and it says looking for Bootstrap 4 question mark at the top, because it's really trying to push you into that. Where we have this SAS and less. And you can kind of read up on what those two are, but they are called CSS preprocessors, less, and SAS. Bootstrap 4 uses SAS, Bootstrap 3 uses less. The reason why I prefer Bootstrap 3 is because it uses this less system, basically the way it works is that it creates two CSS files that you include in the site. One of them is a theme file, and that theme you can customize directly on the site. So when you set it up, you can set it up the way you want it, and it means that there's a lot less that you have to set up later. So it's a lot more out of the box, ready to go, and that's what I like about it. As far as functionality, I actually find that Bootstrap 3 has more functionality. They've kind of simplified it more in Bootstrap 4 and taken away a lot of the features. So for that reason, I still prefer Bootstrap 3. So within Bootstrap 3, you can click on this Customize button. Customize and download. So in this, we will go through, and as you can see, it has templates where we can actually change and modify every single thing about this file. So every single color that it uses is listed here, and we can adjust all of those right here and then create the file that we're going to download and put on our site. That isn't offered in Bootstrap 4, which is why, as I said before, I prefer Bootstrap 3. So, without further ado, we're going to go back up to the top here, and we are going to uncheck glyph icons and uncheck the close icon and leave everything else checked. Now the reason why glyph icons, we haven't talked about it before. I probably could have mentioned it in our last video when we talked about images and stuff like that, because this is basically an icon set. So if you ever look at websites that have different buttons and things like that, and they have little icons beside them, like for example, you look down at the bottom, there's that X for close. We kind of all know that that X means close. You look up at the top here, there's a line, we know that means minimize. This box we know means full screen. The circle, these arrows, these are all icon files, and we can create our menus using those same icon files. And one set of those types of icons is called glyph icons. Bootstrap 3 includes a basic set of those glyph icons, which is a type of icon set, for free, and it integrated very well into the system. The problem is that the base set doesn't have a whole lot to it. You can pay to get more, but for whatever legal reason, when they created Bootstrap 4, they actually completely got rid of it. So if you ever think of upgrading to Bootstrap 4, it won't have those glyph icons in it anyway. And if you want more than what is just in the base, you're going to have to pay to get those. However, I use a different set of icons that has a lot more to it and is also free. Now that one also includes a payable upgrade, but I find that the base set by itself is usually enough for what I need. Again, if you want to pay to get more, you can, but I don't find that specifically necessary in most cases. And that base set is significantly larger and more diverse than the base set that comes with the glyph icons. So when we do get into using icons, we will go through using those ones. Okay. Keep all of that checked, and then it says down here it produces two files, bootstrap.javascript and a minified bootstrap.min.js. Now if you noticed, the file that we downloaded for jQuery had that min as well. Basically what that means, and you can honestly just open this if you want to look at it, is you notice that it exists on 3 lines. That third line is just an empty line. The first one is commented out. So you can see with JavaScript, it uses the same as the PHP and CSS, using those 2 slashes with the asterisks. And then it has everything on one line. So if you remember back when I was telling you initially about white space, this just goes and removes all of the white space so that it's all on one straight line. And that is the difference between the one that says min and the one that doesn't. It's a smaller file because they've removed all of the white space throughout the entire document. Now you can get one that isn't minified, which basically just means it has all the regular tabs and line breaks that you would normally expect to see in code to make it easy to read, but that does increase the file size. So this one is smaller in size, loads faster, but is significantly harder to read, but we don't need to ever read it, so we can just keep that one. Okay, going back now, you can see that it has a bunch of different fields, and we'll kind of go through what each of these are. So under colors, the very first thing, gray and brand colors for use across Bootstrap. So they use a lot of different grays, and they have the base as just black. Now if you look at this and it has just 3 instead of our normal 6, and you're saying, what the heck is that? Whenever you have a case where it is double letters, or double numbers I should say, a short code for that is basically just using a single digit to replace the 2. So if it is just 3 digits, each of those digits is doubled. So 000 would actually be 6 zeros. The triple F is actually 6 Fs. If it were 0F0, that would be 00FF00, and on like that. And it's just a way that they made to further create shortcuts to save on file space. Otherwise, if you see more filled out ones, it will show it in the full. Now, when you see things like this, it's literally them taking their own code and applying it. So in this case, they're saying, take this color and darken it by this amount. When it has the @ symbol, it's saying that, so add gray base, it's whatever the value for gray base is, which in this case is all zeros and black. So I can tell you right off the bat that these are all different shades of gray. The brand primary is a blue, the brand success is green, brand info is a different shade of blue than the brand primary, the warning is an amber color, and the danger is a red color. And those are fairly standard colors because, as I mentioned before, a lot of people use Bootstrap and a lot of people use those default values. And success messages in green and danger messages in red have kind of been mainstreamed, so we don't really want to change those, although we can. Now, going into the scaffolding, we start getting into more interesting things. So, for example, it has the body BG or body background color. So this will be the background color for all of your site. Now, if you remember, I went and we created this little notation so that I could remember what colors I wanted to use. So this is the color that I would like to use for my background. Single pound. The text color, I'm not going to use their dark gray. I'm going to use my gray. The link color, I'm going to use my header color, so my red. Link hover color. So what this says is it takes this color and just makes it 15% darker. So when you hover over a link by basically holding your mouse over it like this, notice it goes from their gray to that purple. That is the hover color. Okay, so it says it'll take this color and just make it slightly darker, and that is fine. And the link hover decoration, by default it is underline, which means it'll put an underline when you hover over it, and I'm going to change that to none because I don't like that. Now, typography is basically what our font is. Now, I haven't actually talked about fonts yet, so I guess this is a good time to do that. Now, when you choose a font, you don't necessarily have to choose one, and you don't necessarily want to. It's like everything else. You want it to be compatible for multiple people. But the problem is, not everybody has the same fonts. Different operating systems will come with different fonts installed. Anybody at any time can install new fonts on their computer, but you don't necessarily know who has what fonts. Different programs like word processors like Microsoft Word, even Adobe Photoshop, all of those programs come stocked with their own fonts. When you install the software, it installs those new fonts. So the more programs you have, likely the more fonts you have. Also, if you do any graphical work, you might have gone over and above and downloaded additional font types to aid in basically marketing purposes, creating new logos and a massive other different marketing materials, all of which having a large font base is very useful for. So if that is you, you might have a lot more fonts than other people use, and if you find a particular font you like and you want to use it and the people viewing your site don't have it, it won't actually show up properly. So what we do is we have fallbacks. So when you see the font that is listed, you will actually notice that there are multiple fonts, and you might have heard of some of these: Helvetica, Arial, and sans serif. Now, there are two types of fonts, serif and sans serif. If you need to know what the difference is between the two, it is as simple as looking right here. So if you see this L, how it has the line on the bottom, that little tick at the top, those are what are known as serif. Sans serif, meaning no serif, is more like this, where an I is just a straight line and a dot instead of having those extra lines. The L is just a straight line. So this text here is sans serif, this text here is serif. And that is honestly the easiest way to describe that. And most fonts fall into one of those two categories. Now, as far as the rest, basically you can create a font family, and all you need to do is list your fonts, starting with the one that you want to use, and then if it'll look for that font on the person's computer. If they don't have it, then it'll go to the next in the list and check if they have that, and then the next, and the next. So typically you have, at the end, just serif or sans serif, and that will basically say anything that they have that is this type of font, use that as a last resort. But we can aid this in another way by actually having our software install the font that we want. So if there's a specific font you want to make sure that that's what the user sees. You can actually have the font on your website and allow them to download it from your site directly in order to view it. And we basically just embed it into the site. And that's an option. and we'll go through how to do that later. For now, we're just going to set it as whatever they have for the defaults here, because it doesn't really matter what we put here. We can change that later, and we most likely will anyway. So I'm just going to leave that all the same, although you can, if you want, adjust the font size. So the base font they have at 14 pixels. And you can actually increase that or decrease that if you so choose. I think I normally put it a little bit bigger, but for the case, or for this case anyway, I'm just going to leave it at that default for now. Again, it's because I know I can change it later, so it's not a big deal for me. Okay, now iconography. As I mentioned before, it has glyph icons built into it, so that's why you see these. We can just leave that, although we haven't included the glyph icons, it will still add the code for it, but that's not a big deal. Okay, padding size, I'm just going to leave all of this default. Okay, the component active color is something we're going to want to change. So this is the global color for active items, navs, or dropdowns. So basically, the best way to describe what this is when you actually here, if you notice when I hover over these different things, two things happen. One, the background behind the text actually gets a little bit darker. It's hardly noticeable, but it is there. And the same for the text. So that 15% darker is what they actually use here. But the active color is basically if I click on one of these links. So right now we have customize selected. So the active color would say when I click on that, so we're in customize, this customize button would actually be a different color, and that is whatever we choose it to be. So if you don't want it to be different, if you want it to just stay the same, you would have it the same as your normal link color. But you can have it show up as a different color if you want to give it some kind of highlight. Component active color. So I'm going to change that, and I'm just going to keep it the same red as my links. Okay, and the component active background. Global background color for active items, navs, or dropdowns. And I'm going to change that to say transparent, which means that it won't actually show anything. It'll go through and just be the same as whatever the normal background is. As you can see here, they did that there. Okay, so for tables, background hover color and background accent. For now, I'm just going to leave those. Table border color, I'm going to change that to my border color. Sorry, I just want to make sure that I am not missing any other colors in here. Okay, so border color, and we want that to be my green that we selected. Buttons. Okay, so the button default background color, this is going to be, now remember how my color was gold for my backgrounds, the CC9900. So basically with the exception of my menu border and my background color, the text, the heading, and the menu background can all use those shortcodes. So the text can just be #333, the heading can be #700, and the menu background can be #C90. Okay, going back, button default background will be C90. Button default border will be my green, and the default button color is going to be my red. Button primary color. So with the buttons, they basically have two primary sets that you can switch between. So think of it as these are all the buttons that are going to be on your site. You can change what they look like by default. So for example, this is a button. So it has a white background, a purple border, and purple text, and when you hover over it, it inverts that. So the border stays purple because that doesn't change, but the background changes too. So the border is always purple, the background goes from white to purple, and the text goes from purple to white when you hover over it. Going back down to our buttons. So the default button is kind of the main button. Then you have the primary, which is kind of like a secondary button type, and then you'll have success, info, warning, and danger. You will also have a disabled color. So if they can't click on it, it'll be quote unquote grayed out, and you can control what that gray out looks like. So for the primary, I am going to I think I'm just going to invert the red and the gold. So the primary color will be C90. The background will be #700. And the border be #45. There we go. And success. Info, warning, danger. So I'm going to keep the background the success color, but instead of having the text as white, I'm going to change it to my dark gray that I have my text at. And the borders are just a darker version of the color, which is fine. So I like all that. Forms. The input background for the forms. I don't want it to be that. I want it to be my normal text background color, which is this, the CC999. Input background disabled. We're going to keep it light gray. Input color. So this is at gray, which means it would be the black. We're going to change that to our normal text color. The input border, it has it as a kind of silver color. I'm going to change that to our normal border color. input border focus. So this is the color that it changes to when it gets focused. What that means is, if you see how this field is gray, like this is a text field, we can type in it, but when I select it, the border turns into this highlighted blue color. That is the input border focus. So I'm going to change that to our red color. Or just 700. Input color placeholder. So the input color placeholder, basically that means that if you don't have anything typed in there, sometimes you will see a light gray text appear in the background, giving you information on what you should be putting into that field. Sometimes it will actually be an example of what you can type in, and it is typically a light gray color. So I'm actually going to do that. Drop down background. We're going to keep that at our normal background color. Drop down border. Now remember when I talked about RGB colors and RGBA, that's what this is. So this is basically telling us that it is 000 or black, and 0.15, so 15% transparency, and it's black. So this will actually show up as kind of a transparent light gray. And the fallback, meaning if it doesn't support transparency for whatever reason, it is just going to be a solid silver color. But we're going to change that to a dark gray. And I'm going to do that as well, make it a darker color. Drop down the cover color. So the divider, I'm going to make my gold color. The link hover, I'm going to make the gold color. Drop down link color, I'm going to make our red. Disabled color, I'm going to make our text color. Actually, I'm going to make it a bit lighter than our text color, but still a gray. Drop down header color. Will be our red. drop down carrot color will also be our red. Drop down link active color. I'm actually going to do a little bit of their code with this. So I'm going to go and darken at darken the link color by 10%. Actually, I'm going to make this 5%. And change this to that and make that 10%. So when you hover over it, it will be darker than the active one. The active one will be darker than the regular one. And this I'm going to darken the active color by 5% as well. Okay. Now you don't obviously have to use the same pattern that I'm doing. You can make these whatever you want them to be. I hope it's fairly straightforward, and if you don't know specifically what those kind of things are, it has more of a description here. So, for example, a drop-down menu is if you have a menu at the top, like for example this 3.4, this is a drop-down menu. This, because that is what we clicked on, is the active item, and the hover is when I go over it. So you can see when I hover, it actually has a light gray color to the background, and I believe there's a little bit of a now I might not have that at all because I zoomed in too much. If you notice one of those things, when I zoom in, I get this little what is known as a hamburger, and that is a compressed menu, and that menu actually changed when I zoomed in using the control plus and minus. That is actually a feature that is part of Bootstrap and one of the reasons we're using it, and that is basically what we call a scalable site. So when you have a small screen, you'll have a different visual site than when you're viewing the same site on a large screen, and it's controlled by the actual size of the display. So when I'm zooming in, I'm basically telling it I have a smaller screen, so it changes what I get to view. So you zoom in enough and you basically get what it would look like on a cell phone instead of on a desktop computer. And that is something we very much like when we're designing websites. We want something that we consider mobile first. So basically, when you design a site and you want it to work just as well on a cell phone as you do on a desktop computer, and basically everything in between, you design it so that it looks good on the small device first, and then you scale it up to the larger size. And Bootstrap, one of the great things it does for us is make that process a lot easier and right out of the bag. And that's one of the reasons why I like it, and one of the reasons why we're going to use it. Okay, getting back down here. I know this is a long process, but all this customizing that we do now means we don't have to do that work later. Okay, so drop down menus, you've seen what those are for. The border color is the color of the border trim around the outside, which I don't even know if it's really that noticeable on here, but I believe it's a white. Alright. Anyway, where are we here? Drop downs. Okay. So we have all that. Media query breakpoints. Okay, so the only thing you really need to change in here is these numbers here. And this is basically when I was talking about that mobile first. So this says what the pixel width for the screen should be before it changes to that predefined attribute. So it by default sets it at 480 pixels, 768, 992, and 1200. We don't need to adjust those. You can if you want, but they do work pretty well out of the box. So we're just going to leave that, but just know that that's what it is. The grid system. Now, Bootstrap by default gives us a really useful grid column system. So instead of having to use tables to create rows and columns, we can use their default grid system. And one of the things it controls is the number of columns. So it will always have that maximum number of columns. And you can basically say if you want it to take up 1, 2, 3, up to the max size of columns. The default is 12. I've used 12 for pretty much all of them. I've dabbled a bit in different sizes, like even 16 when I wanted just a little bit more flexibility. But at the end of the day, I find it doesn't make that big of a difference. The grid gutter width, padding between columns. So that is the gap that you would see between each of the columns. And honestly, that's fine. Container sizes, we're not going to mess with any of that. The nav bar, this is the main menu navigation. So if you look at the top of the screen, this right here is their nav bar. We will be creating one of these for our site. So this is that main menu bar that has the links to the different areas of the site. So nav bar, there we go. So keep that in mind when we're setting these colors. So the nav bar default background color is the background of that, which in our case, I want that to be the gold color. The default color for that, I want that to be red. The navbar default link color, I want to be red. Navbar default border. Now this, I don't want that. I want that to be my green color. Let's see, the default link hover color. So when I hover over a link, will it change color? And have it change to our gray. I actually kind of like that, so we're going to go with that. Link hover background. So when you hover over it, will the background color change? We don't want it to change, so we keep that at transparent. The link active color, so if we have one of these things active, what color should it be? That I am going to set to be darken our red color by 5%. Default link active background, we're going to keep that transparent as well. And if it is disabled, what color should it be? I'm going to go with dark gray, but lighter gray than our text gray. Link disabled background will be transparent. Default brand color, we will keep that same. Background hover background. Transparent. Icon bar background. Transparent. Toggle border color will be our normal border color, which is our green. Actually, the default. I'm just going to leave that. Okay, so now the navbar inverse background. So the inverted navbar. So basically, navbar is our default. We can create an inverted navbar, which basically means that if this one was dark, you would have this one as light, or vice versa. So with this, and we'll keep that navbar inverse background 10%. The inverse background color we are going to use would be red. And the inverse color, I'm actually going to use our site's background color for this one. That's it, right? Yeah, CCC999. Perfect. Okay, inverse link color. This will be same as the inverse color. So our links and our regular text on the nav bars will be the exact same color, and that's typically because we won't have much of any text, but if we do, we want it to match that. If you do have text, typically it's dividers or something along those lines, and you want it to kind of all be the same color and match. Okay, navbar, inverse navbar. Okay, inverse link hover color. The inverse link hover color, so when we hover over, we want that to be our gold. So the text will be that light yellow, and then when you hover over it, it will change to gold. The background color will be transparent, so it will just stay as the regular background color. Link active color. Bar inverse link color hover color. So it's saying this will be the same as this, which is what we want. So we will just leave that. Active background. it says it will just make that background 10% darker. So sure, we will keep that. And disabled. It says we want that, but I'm going to make it lighter again. Transparent. Reverse brand color. Reverse link color, yes. Okay. Brand hover color. Background. Inverse toggle hover background. Transparent. Icon bar. Background. Transparent. And border color. Toggle border color. Border color will always be our green. Nav, shared nav styles. Padding, nav link hover background. Link hover background. Change that to transparent. And I'm just going to keep those at the light gray. Tabs. So a tab is basically kind of like a menu, but when you select one, it usually stands out from the others, like tabs on a folder. So tab border color is going to be our green again. Border color, hover border color. Darken that by 5%. By 10%. Control A for select all, Control C for copy, Control V for paste. And I'm going to make that 5%. So when you hover over it, it gets a little bit darker, and when you select it, it becomes darker when you hover over it, and then when it's selected, it's lighter than when you hover over it, but darker than the normal, if that makes sense. Okay, nav tabs. Oh, sorry, this is the background. So I want Control A, select all, Control X for cut, Control V for paste. This is the background. I want that transparent. The hover border color. Link hover background. Okay. Link hover border. This one. That's where I want that. Okay. The active link hover border color. Okay. Now this one is the active link hover color, which we are going to want to be our red. Tabs justified active link border color. This is also just going to be red. Justified link border color. Oh, link border color. Active. And link border. Okay. So I put the nav tabs border color and the justified link border color. So justified basically means that it covers the entire width. So if you see these are all kind of stacked together on this side, justified would mean that all the space, so it would be from here to here, and it would just space these out evenly and take up the full width, and that is quote-unquote justified. Similar to how you could justify text in a Word document. Okay, so that is tabs. Pills, we don't have to really do anything there. Pagination. Okay, so what pagination is basically when you have articles that have multiple pages, you can have at the bottom like page 1, page 2, page 3 with like back and forward arrows, and you can click on those to kind of navigate between those pages. They're good for blogs, articles, news, stuff like that. Probably not going to use them in our site at all, because I don't really see how it would be useful for most kind of small business purposes. So we don't really have to focus too much on that. But you would want it to be kind of the same colors. So pagination color should be the link color. The pagination background, you just want that to be your normal site background. So honestly, I'm just going to put that as transparent. Border, it can have a border. I'm going to use transparent again. Hover color, link hover color, hover background. Keep it transparent. Hover border, transparent. pagination active color. Red, active background, transparent, active border, transparent, disabled color, disabled background, transparent, and border transparent. Okay. So this one's laid out a little bit nicer. It's all the different borders, all the different backgrounds, and all the different font colors. Going over each, just the regular color, the hover color, the active color. So again, if it has 3 pages, it would show page 1, 2, and 3. If you're on page 2, the page 2 would be the active color, and then if you highlight it by mousing over it, that would be the hover color. And disabled, if you have it disabled so they can't click on it, how it would show up. Yeah, that is that. And actually what I'm going to do for no, I'm just going to leave all that. Okay. The pager is basically the parent group for the pagination. So kind of the box that it goes into. So we're just going to leave all that. Jumbotron. The Jumbotron we probably won't use, but for example, this thing, this customize and download, this is a Jumbotron. It's basically a large box used to grab attention at the top of a page, or sometimes at the bottom, but that is essentially what the Jumbotron is. So you can have it with a specific layout. We're just going to leave that, except the background. I guess we can change that. I'm going to make it the gold color. So if we do use that, it'll look more like a sign, kind of stand out. Form states and alerts. Those I'm going to keep all the exact same because that's our success, info, warning, and danger colors. And I'm going to keep those at their defaults. The tooltips. So basically, what a tooltip is, when you hover over something, you might sometimes see a little box appear that gives you more information about what that field is or what it does. I don't know that any of these actually have something like that. Does anything have... No, nothing on here has that. There we go. That little box that appears that has the site and the name, that would be a tooltip, right? So basically you can create some kind of text that when you hover over it, a little box will appear beside it that can give whatever information you want. So if there's like an acronym or initialism that you think people might not be familiar with, you can have it where it looks like a link, so the person would basically hover the mouse over it, and then that box would appear, and you could use that to maybe put in what that acronym stands for an example of its usage. So that's fine. Where are we here? Tooltips. There we go. So the tooltip color will be our text color. Background color is going to be our main background color. actually I'm going to make that our gold color. Tooltip opacity, so making it semi-transparent, a value between 0 and 1, where 1 is fully opaque or solid, and 0 is invisible. Tooltip arrow width and arrow color. Yeah, that works. Actually, if we're going to have that gold, I might as well put this as the red. So we have the red on gold. That will look better. Okay. Popovers. So a popover is the exact same as a tooltip, except it's a little fancier. You can put a title on it. That is more for giving a lot more detailed information on something. So if you want more than just a brief description of something, if you want to go like really in depth on something, and like I said, it has the option for a large header, you would use a popover. So the popover background, this one I will make our normal background color, border color, I will make our normal border color green, title background, this I will make our gold, border fallback color, and the fallback color is always in places where they have by default a transparency in case it doesn't support transparencies. It says, well, then just make it this solid color instead, but we're using a solid color, so we're just going to put that same one there. Okay, it's all fine. Labels. A label is kind of like this toggle all, except that is a button, but it would look just like that. It's basically something where you can have a little circle or kind of rounded square with text inside. For example, if you want to have new or sale or something like that, you could do that through a label. So the default background for the label will be our default background color. Primary I'm going to make our gold color, and for the success, info, warning, danger, I'm going to keep those the same. The label color will be red, and the label link hover color will be darken our red by 5%. Yeah, make it 10%. Okay. Modals. So modals, you are going to become intimately familiar with at some point during this process. A modal is basically a pop-up window that is commonly used for like logins and forms and anything like that. Basically, when you click on a button, it will create a kind of transparent black screen, so it basically darkens everything there, and then you'll get a window that pops up in front of that. So it kind of fades out everything on your page, gives you a bright window in front of you, and has information for you to fill out. When you click outside of that, or they'll have like a little X or a close button at the bottom, something like that, or all of those things, it will close that box. That box is called a modal. Okay, so modal content background. This will be the same color as our site background. The content border color. This is going to be our border. Modal backdrop background. So that backdrop is the color of the screen behind it, and the backdrop opacity, so basically it's saying make it black and make it 50% transparent, so it basically darkens the screen by 50%. Header border color, footer border color, same as the header. Large size is 900 pixels, medium size 600, and small is 300. We're going to keep all of those. That's the width of the modal. The length will be determined by the content within it. And we're going to keep all those as default. I'm going to keep all this. So an alert is basically a box message that will pop up depending on what happens. So for example, if you have a login, somebody logs into the site, when they return to it, you would pop up a little success message telling them that they logged in successfully, so that they know that it worked. At the same time, if it didn't work, it would pop up an error message telling them that it didn't work and hopefully why it didn't work, so that they know what to do from there. Little important messages like that are very nice to have. Same thing like if they send a message, it's nice to know that it actually sent and is going somewhere, or it didn't. For our example with our site, if we do online orders, we want people to know that their order was successfully submitted, or if it didn't go through, why it didn't, and allow them to fix it and resend it. Progress bars should be fairly straightforward. Probably not going to use them for anything, to be perfectly honest, but we will want that in there. So we are going to go with bar color. We're going to make it our actual background color green, and the bar itself we're going to make our red, because why not? Okay, list groups. Background color will be our regular site background color. Border is going to be our normal border color. Hover background is going to be transparent. List group active color. color, the red. Link hover color, same as the link color, and the link color is here, which we don't want it to be that. We want it to be also red. Panels. So panels are kind of the main blocks that we're going to be using. So within a panel there will be a heading, a body, and a footer. It's basically like a modal but built into the page instead of overlaid on top of it. So the panel background we want to be going to make gold. Borders are going to be green. The footer background going to be also gold. Default text going to be our I'm actually going to change that to our light yellow. Default border, heading background, primary text will be red, primary border, primary heading background, we're going to change it up and make that green, I think, for funsies. Okay, so the success, info, warning, and danger, we're going to keep all that the same. Thumbnails. Thumbnail border. A well is kind of like an input box that you can't edit is really the best way to describe it. It is like a panel, but for something that would just be kind of a single line. It's just a body of text that has a border around it and a background, basically. So the background color for our well will be the gold color. And the border will be our regular border. Badges are like labels, but typically numbers. So, for example, if you have messages and you want to say, oh, we have 2 new messages, you would have a little box with the number 2 in it. That would be a badge. So the badge color is going to be, actually, let's make the badge color green. The link hover color the badge background color is green. And the badge color will be our background color. No, gold. Yeah. No, I'm going to go with background color. Yeah, I like that more. Okay, badge active color. That I will make gold. Active background is still going to be that. Font weight, bold, line height. Okay. Breadcrumbs. We're not going to use breadcrumbs, but if we did, that would be our background color. And this would be our text color. And this would be black, actually. Make that stand out a bit more. Okay. Carousel controller color. Background color, caption color will be our background color. All these white things we're going to change to our background color. Code, if we want to show code, which we likely will not be doing. So honestly, I'm just going to leave that. Type, I'm going to leave all that. And we're done. So compile and download. If that did not take forever. Okay. So now, when you download this, it will come as a zip file. If you don't have something that can open a zip file, I highly recommend getting a program called 7-Zip. .7-Zip download from 7zip.org. When you go here, you will see it is available for any and every operating system. And you want it for 64-bit Windows. if we are using 64-bit Windows. We want it in an executable file. So download that one and install. That's already what I have. It's a free program. It does zip files, it does RAR files, it does a lot more. It's significantly faster than most other zip programs, and it is completely free. So highly recommend using that for all of your zip needs. Okay, now once you have it open, you will see this. So there's a configure.json file. We don't need that. There are two folders, a JS folder and a CSS folder. Those might look familiar because we have both those folders on our site. Very convenient. It tells you which ones go into which. However, we don't need all the files that will be in here. When you open it up, you will see that there's a bootstrap.min.js, and going up in the CSS, there are 4 files in here: a bootstrap.min.css, bootstrap.css, bootstraptheme.min.css, and bootstraptheme.css. Now, we need half of these files, and we want the ones that say min, because these aren't files that we're going to need to go into and edit because we already configured them the way that we wanted. So we basically need 3 files: the bootstrapmin.js. So if we go into here and open this back up, we can drag this into there. It says no, we can't because this is zipped, so it doesn't like that. We need to unzip that file. If you right click after installing 7-zip, you will see a 7-zip file come up, and you can extract to Bootstrap, which will create a Bootstrap folder. And now, instead of it being a zip file, it is a folder. And we can try that again. So we want bootstrap.min.js and move that there. Go up, CSS. If you select one, hit and hold Control and select the other, it will highlight both of those. If you do Shift, it would do all the ones in between. So hold Control, and then holding both of those, we copy those over to our CSS folder. Then we can close that, and you can delete it from your downloads folder if you want. We do not need them anymore. Okay, so now that we have those all in there, you may want to just make sure that they are all uploaded. You can do them individually. If you do them individually, you have to make sure that you wait until one is done before you do the next. But when you copy them, they should just automatically upload for you. It might not show it though, so I like to do that just in case. And I did the wrong one. That's right. Okay. So going back to our index.php, we now need to add these. So the important thing, so we'll start with the JavaScript file, is we need to add the JavaScript file after the jQuery because Bootstrap requires jQuery as one of its prerequisites. So we need to make sure that the jQuery file is loaded before the Bootstrap file. So after this, we are going to create another script, src, and in the src, highway45.ca/javascript/bootstrap.min.js. Okay, and now for the link. Now the link, our JavaScript file here, anything that we want to change or edit, we're going to put in this file. And like I said before, the way that the hierarchy works is it takes anything that's loaded and will basically load it in that order. So with the Bootstrap files, we want to load them in before our custom CSS file. That way anything in our custom file will overwrite the other things. So if we want to make any changes, we don't have to change the Bootstrap files. We can make the changes within our own file, and that way we only have to work with the one file, and anything we change in here will be what actually happens on the page. So we're going to create it above this one, and it will be a link src, or sorry, link rel, and this is a style sheet. The type is text / CSS, and the href is https://highway45.ca/css/bootstrap.min.css, and then we're just going to highlight that, basically have the cursor in front of it at the start, so not over here but at the start of the line, and hold shift and hit the down arrow, and that will highlight that row. Control C for copy, and then go underneath it and Control V for paste. And then we just have to edit this to go bootstrap-theme. Alright, so now we have the two. We have Bootstrap. The theme comes after the main Bootstrap because the theme modifies and uses information from that core Bootstrap, so the Bootstrap by itself has to come first, and then ours comes after that. So we're going to save that, and we can close that, close that, close that, and we're back to our main page. Highway 45 restaurant, hit refresh, and you will notice right away that this changed. Now the reason why this changed is because Bootstrap has predefined header, a predefined set of headers that is different from the default HTML. So the font has changed, the size has changed. That's about all that has. Everything else is kind of the same, but that is why. Okay, so that is where we're going to leave off for today. So in the next video, we will work on utilizing Bootstrap to create a menu system, as well as create a better title / logo for the website. And I will see you in that next video.